Every journey has a beginning. Before Travel Made Personal was a brand, it was just me, a notebook, and the road. This is TMP Origins, the stories that started it all. Day 3, July 25th, 2015. I woke up around 6:30 that morning. The hotel room was still quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens before the day really begins. My son was still asleep, so I sat down and finished the journal entry from the night before. Once that was done, I packed our day bag and gently woke him up. It was 7:34 a.m., and we were about to abandon our entire itinerary. Originally, the plan for the day was to explore more of Washington, D.C. I had spent weeks building that itinerary in road trippers. But when I looked at it that morning, neither of us felt excited about it. So I did what any traveler eventually learns to do. I asked a different question. What else is nearby? When I pulled up the map, two names jumped out immediately: Gettysburg and Antietam. Both battlefields were only a couple hours away. My son was especially fascinated with Antietam, but Gettysburg has a gravity to it that's hard to ignore. It's one of those places that almost pulls you toward it. So we made a decision. We scrapped the plan completely. At that point in the trip, I had only scheduled 19 stops total, and 14 of them were already behind us from the first 2 days of travel. From that moment on, the rest of the journey would be guided by curiosity instead of checkboxes. And honestly, those are usually the best travel days. We went downstairs for the hotel's continental breakfast, which turned out to be bread and yogurt. Not exactly the breakfast of battlefield explorers. So we crossed the street to McDonald's, grabbed breakfast for the road, and pointed the car north toward Pennsylvania. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive. Along the way, I kept asking my son to take pictures of pretty scenery out the window, and he was not thrilled about that job. By the halfway point, he had firmly decided that photography would not be his future career path. Travel does that sometimes. Sleep schedules get weird, energy dips, and moods wobble a little. His narcolepsy especially doesn't love disrupted routines, so the first half of the day was a little snippy between the two of us. But that's part of traveling together too. You talk it out, you reset, and the day keeps going. When we finally arrived, the first thing that struck me was how beautiful it was. Rolling farmlands, quiet roads, little historic buildings that feel like they've been there forever. I remember looking around and joking that I wanted to move there. My son looked at me like I had just suggested relocating to Mars. He would definitely miss his friends, so that dream lasted about 5 seconds. We walked the long path to the Gettysburg Visitor Center and bought tickets for the battlefield experience. Inside the complex, we visited 3 things before ever stepping onto the battlefield itself: a short introductory film, the massive Gettysburg cyclorama painting, and the museum exhibits. The film hit both of us harder than we expected. It's strange sometimes how history reaches across time like that. Standing there watching the story unfold, my son and I both felt it, the weight of what happened there. Neither of us said much about it, but we both teared up a little. One thing that stuck with me from the visitor center was a quote from Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. "In great deeds, something abides, and generations drawn from afar come to see where great things were suffered and done." At the time, I just thought it was a beautiful quote. Looking back now, I realize it was describing exactly what we were doing there, and exactly what we're doing here today. After the museum, we stopped by the gift shop. That's where I bought something that would quietly follow me through a lot of future travels. My first Passport to Your National Parks book. For my son, we found a street sign for his room. Then we picked up a self-guided battlefield audio tour so we could explore at our own pace. And that turned out to be the perfect way to experience Gettysburg. For the rest of the afternoon, we drove slowly through the battlefield while the audio guide explained what happened at each location. And what happened there changed the course of American history. At one point during the tour, we stopped at a ridge overlooking part of the battlefield. There was already a pretty large group gathered along the edge of the overlook, and the drop on the other side of the ridge was fairly steep. My son and I aren't exactly crowd people, and with that sudden drop-off, I didn't want us navigating the edge while everyone was packed together. So we waited near the sidewalk by the parking area until the crowd started to clear out. While we waited, my child climbed up onto a massive boulder sitting beside the parking lot. He sat there for a second, looked around proudly, and then announced in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm sitting on a historic rock." The entire crowd burst out laughing, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. At Gettysburg, just about every rock probably does have a story. I snapped a picture of him sitting there like he had just discovered the most important artifact on the battlefield, and to this day, it's still one of my favorite photos from that trip. In the summer of 1863, the Civil War had already been raging for more than 2 brutal years. Confederate General Robert E. Lee had just won a major victory at the Battle of Chancellorsville and decided to take a bold gamble. He would invade the North. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, about 75,000 soldiers strong, crossed into Pennsylvania hoping a decisive victory on Northern soil might force the Union to negotiate peace. Standing in his way was the Union Army of the Potomac, roughly 90,000 soldiers, now commanded by Major General George G. Meade, who had taken command only days earlier. Neither army planned to fight at Gettysburg. But on July 1st, 1863, advance units from both sides collided near the small crossroads town, and suddenly, the war's bloodiest battle had begun. Union cavalry under Brigadier General John Buford delayed Confederate forces west of town long enough for Union infantry to arrive. Heavy fighting erupted throughout the day. Union troops were eventually pushed back through Gettysburg, but they managed to regroup on strong defensive positions south of town: Cemetery Hill, Cemetery Ridge, and Culp's Hill. Those hills formed a defensive line shaped like a fishhook, and that ground would become the key to the battle. On July 2nd, day 2, Lee ordered attacks on both ends of the Union line. The southern end of the battlefield saw brutal fighting at places that are now famous: Devil's Den, the Wheat Field, and the Peach Orchard. One of the most dramatic moments of the battle happened on Little Round Top, a rocky hill at the end of the Union line. There, the 20th Maine Regiment, commanded by Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, held off repeated Confederate attacks. Running low on ammunition, Chamberlain ordered a desperate bayonet charge down the hill that drove the attackers back and helped secure the Union flank. By day 3, Lee believed the center of the Union line had weakened. So on July 3rd, he ordered a massive assault directly at Cemetery Ridge. After a massive artillery bombardment, roughly 12,500 Confederate soldiers advanced across nearly a mile of open ground in what is now known as Pickett's Charge. Union artillery and rifle fire tore through the advancing ranks. A small number of Confederate soldiers briefly reached the stone wall at the center of the Union line, a spot remembered today as the high water mark of the Confederacy. But the attack collapsed. Pickett's charge was a devastating failure. When the fighting ended, the cost was staggering. Over 51,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing in just 3 days, making Gettysburg the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War. Lee's army retreated back toward Virginia on July 4th, and although the war would continue for nearly 2 more years, Gettysburg marked a turning point. The Confederacy would never again launch a major invasion of the North. A few months later, President Abraham Lincoln returned to the battlefield to dedicate the soldiers' national cemetery. There, he delivered a speech only about 2 minutes long, but the Gettysburg Address would become one of the most powerful speeches in American history. For my son and I, the history came alive slowly as we drove those quiet roads. Each monument, each field, each hill, everywhere we stopped, the audio guide told another piece of the story. By the time we finished the tour, the sun was starting to drop lower in the sky. We grabbed groceries on the way back to the hotel, and then we got to the room. We crashed. Hard. It had been a long day, but it was also one of those travel days that sticks with you, the kind where curiosity pulls you somewhere unexpected, and history meets you there waiting. And all because we decided to throw the itinerary away. Some of the most meaningful places we visit aren't the ones we carefully plan. They're the ones we stumble into when we follow a different road. Gettysburg was one of those places, and it reminded me that sometimes the best thing you can do on a trip is let the map surprise you. And now here we are, over 10 years later. Gettysburg is calling me back again. In just a few months, Dusty and I are heading back to Gettysburg National Military Park to walk these fields again. This time, with cameras rolling and a much deeper understanding of the story. So this episode feels a little bit like closing a circle and opening the next chapter at the same time. Hey, thanks for traveling back with me to where the stories begin. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me next time as the road winds on.